The silence in the hospital room was so thick it cut through the air. Alexander Mitchell, Atlanta real estate mogul, held 2 X-rays against the window while the evening light filtered through his trembling fingers. Fulminant liver degeneration, the doctor had said with that coldness only possessed by those who have learned to deliver death sentences. 5-year-old twins. Identical in everything. Even this. Claire and Emma slept in adjacent beds, connected to machines that beeped with the cruel regularity of a metronome. Their angelic faces, framed by golden curls, revealed nothing of the poison spreading through their small bodies. Both their livers were disintegrating cell by cell, like sand castles kissed by the tide. 2 months, whispered Alexander, and the words fell to the floor like stones. Maximum. From the corner of the room, a 32-year-old woman watched the scene with her heart broken into 1,000 pieces. Emily Thompson had arrived 5 years ago from the Philippines, when the girls were just 2 pink bundles crying in unison. Now, with her faded floral apron and hands that eternally smelled of chamomile, she was the closest thing to a mother that Claire and Emma had ever known. Alexander would never admit it, but Emily wasn't just the nanny. She was the invisible pillar holding together what remained of that family, broken since Sarah, his wife, died in childbirth. The machines kept beeping, time kept running, and somewhere in Atlanta, a silent promise began to take shape in the heart of a woman who loved without legal right, but with an intensity that would move mountains. If this story already touched your heart in this first minute, subscribe to the channel. Here you'll find stories that heal, inspire, and make you believe in human goodness again. The morning of March 15th began like any other in the Mitchell mansion in Buckhead. Claire ate cereal while Emma insisted that strawberries tasted better if she ate them one by one. Emily prepared school backpacks with that mathematical precision only possessed by true mothers. Lukewarm water thermos, fruit cut in perfect cubes, and a sticky note with a smiley face on each sandwich. "Mommy M," said Claire, using the nickname she'd invented at age 3. "Why doesn't Daddy have breakfast with us?" Emily felt the familiar pang. 5 years working in that house, 5 years being the heart that beat in the corners, and she remained invisible to the outside world. But for Claire and Emma, she was everything. The one who healed scraped knees with magical kisses, who invented stories where princesses saved dragons, who stayed awake all night when they had fever. "Daddy works hard so you have everything you need," she replied, adjusting Claire's golden curls. But that morning, something was different. Emma complained of stomach pain during breakfast. Claire threw up as soon as she got to school. By noon, both had high fever and a yellowish color to their skin that made the school principal immediately call emergency services. Alexander arrived at Emory University Hospital with his heart racing. He found his daughters on separate gurneys, but Emily was there, holding one hand of each, like a human bridge between 2 worlds that were crumbling. The test results came like hammers. Blood analyses revealing impossible numbers. Biopsies confirming the unthinkable. Ultrasounds showing organs withering like autumn flowers. "Fulminant liver degeneration of genetic origin," explained Dr. Richardson, chief of pediatric hepatology. "It's extremely rare, 1 chance in 50 million. But when it affects identical twins..." "Can it be treated?" Alexander interrupted. "Liver transplant, urgent. But we'd need 2 compatible donors and the waiting list for children." The doctor left the sentence hanging in the air like a guillotine. "How much time do they have?" 8 weeks, maybe 10 if they respond well to corticosteroids. Alexander Mitchell had built a real estate empire with his bare hands. He had turned empty lots into skyscrapers, transformed entire neighborhoods, moved millions like chess pieces. But that afternoon, sitting between 2 hospital beds, he felt smaller than an ant. Emily didn't move from there for 3 days. She slept in a plastic chair, ate vending machine sandwiches, and showered in the visitor's bathroom. When nurses tried to explain that only direct family members could stay, Claire and Emma cried until they allowed their mommy number 2 to remain. Alexander hired the best specialists in Europe. He flew doctors from Johns Hopkins, from London's Children's Hospital, from Berlin's Charité. They all said the same thing: transplant or death. And compatible donors for 5-year-olds don't grow on trees. The fourth night, when Claire asked if she was going to die, Emily felt something break in her chest. It wasn't just sadness, it was fury. A silent rage against a world that allowed 2 angels to fade, while she, strong and healthy, could only watch. That night, while Alexander made desperate calls to private clinics around the world, Emily made herself a promise that would change everything. But what Emily was planning to do was so unthinkable, so legally impossible, that not even she knew if she'd have the courage to see it through. In the hospital corridors, Emily Thompson had become an efficient shadow moving between machines as if she'd been born within those white walls. Nurses greeted her by name, doctors asked her about the girl's symptoms, and even the cleaning staff had adopted this Filipino woman who carried a mother's tenderness and a warrior's endurance. But outside those 4 walls, Emily remained what she had been for 5 years: invisible. She had arrived in Atlanta with a cardboard suitcase and a broken heart. Her younger sister, Hope, had died at 16 in Manila from hepatitis that became complicated. No bed available in the public hospital, they were told. Go to the private clinic. But private clinics cost what a middle-class family didn't earn in 3 years. Hope died at home, in Emily's arms, while rain pounded the tin windows of their neighborhood. She was the same age Claire and Emma were now. Someday, Emily had promised herself at Manila Airport, someday I'll have the power to save someone. The Mitchells had hired her through an agency when the twins were 6 months old. Sarah, Alexander's wife, had died from a postpartum hemorrhage that doctors couldn't control. Alexander, devastated by the loss and overwhelmed by 2 babies crying in shifts 24 hours a day, desperately needed help. Emily didn't just handle nighttime bottles and diapers. She became the emotional memory of those girls. She was the one who held them when they took their first steps. She who heard their first words, "Mommy," directed not at a photograph on the mantel, but at the brown arms that rocked them every night. To the outside world, Emily was the domestic help. At school parent meetings, she sat in the back while Alexander occupied the front seats. At other children's birthday parties, she was the one who carried bags and watched from a distance. In official documents, she appeared as authorized service personnel for minor pickup. But in the intimacy of that house, Claire and Emma had built a universe where Emily was the gravitational center. She knew Claire had nightmares about blue monsters and only calmed if someone sang Filipino lullabies to her. She knew Emma hid vegetables under her plate and that her favorite stuffed animal was a rabbit she'd named Mr. Floppy. She knew both slept better if she caressed their hair in circular motions, the same way her grandmother had done with her in Cebu. Alexander knew it, though he never said so. In moments of brutal honesty that only come at 3 in the morning, he recognized that Emily had saved his family from total shipwreck. Without her, he would have drowned in work and whiskey, and the girls would have grown up as emotional orphans in their own house. But private recognition didn't translate into legal rights. At the hospital, when doctors asked for the responsible legal guardian, Emily had to step aside. When authorizations for procedures needed to be signed, she held the girls' hands while Alexander stamped his signature on papers that would decide their future. When specialists explained diagnoses, they spoke to him even though she was the one who knew every mole, every allergic reaction, every small detail of those little bodies falling apart. The 5th night at the hospital, Claire woke up crying. "Mommy Em," she whispered, "am I going to heaven with Mommy Sarah?" Emily felt her soul tear apart. She lay down on the narrow hospital bed, hugged Claire against her chest, and for the first time in 5 years, allowed tears to fall freely down her cheeks. "You know what, my love?" she murmured against the golden curls. "There are moms who arrive when you're born, and there are moms who arrive when you need them. I arrived when you needed me, and I'm not going anywhere. Emma, from the adjacent bed, extended her little hand. "Mommy Em, can you sing us the moon song?" And Emily sang, in a low voice, that Filipino lullaby she'd learned as a child. The moon bathes in the river, and the stars watch her dance. Her trembling voice filled the room while machines kept beeping and Atlanta slept beyond the windows. That night, when the girls finally fell asleep, Emily made a decision that would challenge everything she knew about limits, laws, and possibilities. She went to the nurse's station and asked to speak with Dr. Richardson. "Doctor," she said in a voice she didn't recognize as her own, "I need you to explain everything about liver transplants." Everything. What Emily would discover that night would lead her down a path of no return, where she'd have to choose between law and love, between reason and blind faith. April 2nd, Claire and Emma would turn 6. It was a date Emily had marked on the calendar with red hearts since January, planning an epic party with a unicorn theme, chocolate piñata, and a 3-tier cake she would bake herself. But April 2nd arrived wrapped in oxygen tubes and the antiseptic smell of the hospital. The girls had worsened during the night. Their skin now had a greenish-yellow tint reminiscent of autumn leaves before falling. Their little bellies were swollen from fluid retention, and they could barely keep their eyes open for more than a few minutes at a time. "Can we celebrate here?" asked Emma in a voice that sounded like tissue paper crinkling. "With purple balloons?" Emily looked at Alexander, and for the first time in 5 years, she saw in his eyes something that wasn't professional distance. It was pure panic, raw terror, the ancestral fear of a father watching his children vanish like sand between his fingers. "Of course, my love," Emily replied, though she felt the words tearing at her throat. "The most beautiful party in the world." Alexander left the hospital like a hurricane. He bought purple balloons from 5 different stores until he got the 50 he'd promised. He found a bakery that agreed to make a pink castle-shaped cake in 3 hours. He called a children's decoration company that set up a princess stage in the hospital room, with colored lights and tulle curtains that transformed that cold space into something resembling a fairy tale. The hospital staff was infected by the emotional urgency. Nurses arrived with gifts wrapped in shiny paper. Doctors peeked between procedures to sing "Happy Birthday," off-key but sincere. Even the janitor, an older man named Ramon, who always had a smile for the girls, appeared with 2 rag dolls he'd sewn himself. But it was Emily who knew the details that mattered. She knew Claire hated frosting but loved vanilla cake. She knew Emma got more excited about balloons than gifts. She knew both loved blowing out candles, but they'd always made the same wish since age 4. "That we'll be happy forever." The cake arrived at 4 in the afternoon, just as Atlanta's golden light filtered through the hospital windows. It was perfect. 3 tiers of pink cake with frosting towers and small sugar princesses that seemed to dance around the castle. Claire and Emma sat in their beds, dressed in new pajamas Alexander had bought that morning, shimmering unicorns on lilac background. They had deep circles under their eyes and pale lips, but their eyes retained that spark of childish curiosity that no illness had been able to extinguish. "Are you ready to make a wish?" asked Emily, lighting 6 candles on each castle tower. The girls looked at each other with that telepathic complicity only twins possess. They closed their eyes, joined their little hands, and blew out the candles at the same time. "What did you wish for?" asked Alexander, trying to keep his voice steady. Claire and Emma exchanged another knowing look. "That Mommy Em stays with us forever," said Claire. "And that our tummies don't hurt anymore," added Emma. "And that we can go to the park again," continued Claire. "And that Daddy isn't sad," finished Emma. Emily felt the world stop. Alexander slowly sat in the chair next to the beds, and for the first time since his wife's death, he cried in front of his daughters. They weren't silent adult tears. It was the heartbreaking cry of a man who had built empires but couldn't build health into his little girls' bodies. "You are my entire life," he whispered, hugging them carefully, as if they were made of glass. My entire life. The party continued until 7 at night. They ate cake, opened presents, played gentle games that didn't require much energy. The girls laughed, despite everything. That crystal sound filled the hospital room and spilled into the corridors, bringing a little light to other corners where other families fought their own nightmares. But when visitors left and lights dimmed, reality returned like a cold tide. Emma threw up the cake. Claire complained of pain in her side. The machines began beeping more urgently, and nurses came running with syringes and medications that barely relieved symptoms. That night, while the girls slept sedated and Alexander snored restlessly on the convertible sofa he'd installed in the room, Emily stayed awake, looking out the window at Atlanta's buildings, shining like urban constellations. She had made her decision 3 days ago, after talking to Dr. Richardson. Now, seeing Claire and Emma connected to those machines keeping them alive, she knew there was no turning back. She went to the bathroom, closed the door, and dialed a phone number she'd gotten through contacts in the Filipino community of Atlanta. "Dr. Herrera?" she whispered into the phone. "This is Emily Thompson. I think we talked about compatibility tests." From the other end of the line, a tired but understanding voice responded. "Are you sure about what you want to do? Once we start this process, there's no turning back." Emily looked toward the room where her girls slept, her heart's daughters, the only people in the world who called her Mommy without hesitation. "I'm sure," she replied, completely sure. What Emily didn't know was that Dr. Herrera represented her only hope and her greatest risk. What she was about to initiate would challenge the entire American legal system. The results arrived on a rainy Tuesday, hidden in a manila envelope that a messenger discreetly delivered at the hospital cafeteria. Emily opened it with trembling hands while rain pounded the windows and Atlanta blurred behind curtains of water. Compatibility. 94% for both recipients. Those 5 words changed everything. Dr. Herrera had been clear from the beginning. "What you're asking me is medically possible, but legally impossible. In the United States, only blood relatives can be living donors for minors. You are, technically, domestic help." But Emily had insisted. She had sold her modest gold chain, a gift from her grandmother, to pay for private tests. She had invented excuses to absent herself from the hospital during blood draws and genetic analyses. She had lied for the first time in 5 years, saying she had routine medical appointments when she was actually undergoing exhaustive exams that would determine if her liver could save 2 small lives. The human liver has extraordinary regenerative capacity. A healthy adult can donate up to 70% of the organ, and both the donated fragment and the remainder regenerate completely in 6 months. It was the biological miracle that modern science had turned into tangible hope. But American laws were inflexible. Living donors for minors had to be parents, siblings, or direct relatives, not employees, not mothers of the heart, not Filipino women who had raised 2 girls but lacked papers certifying that love. "There's an alternative," Dr. Herrera had told her during their 3rd secret consultation. "Argentina allows altruistic donors for minors in extreme cases, but you'd have to take the girls without legal authorization. It would technically be kidnapping." Emily had felt the room spin around her. Kidnapping? For American law, yes. Taking minors out of the country without authorization from the legal guardian is kidnapping, even if it's to save their lives. You could face 10 to 15 years in prison. But weeks passed, and Claire and Emma worsened each day. Their little bodies swelled from fluid retention. Their skin acquired greenish tones reminiscent of ripe olives. They slept 18 hours a day, and when they woke, they barely had energy to smile. The best hepatologists in Europe had confirmed the diagnosis. Without a transplant, the girls would be lucky to reach May. Alexander had moved heaven and earth. He had contacted private clinics in Switzerland, the United States, Singapore. He had offered millions of dollars for experimental treatments. He had begged international transplant organizations to accelerate the search for compatible donors. Nothing worked. The night of April 15th, Emily found Alexander crying in the hospital hallway. It wasn't the controlled crying of adults striving to maintain composure. It was the heartbreaking bellow of a wounded animal, the sound that emerges when the human soul fractures beyond any possible repair. "I can't save them," he whispered when he saw her approach. "I've built an empire, but I can't save my own daughters." Emily sat next to him in those uncomfortable blue plastic chairs they'd known for weeks. "What if I could?" she asked quietly. Alexander looked at her with reddened eyes. "What? What if I could save them?" She told him everything. The secret tests, the almost perfect compatibility, the possibility of transplant in Argentina. She explained the legal risks, criminal consequences, the possibility that they'd both lose the girls if the plan went wrong. Alexander listened in absolute silence, as if Emily's words were a prayer in an unknown language. "You're crazy," he finally whispered. "Completely crazy. I know. You could go to prison. I know. You could die in the operation. It's 2 simultaneous transplants. It's never been done. I know." Alexander covered his face with his hands. "I can't lose you too. You're all that's left of this family." It was the first time in 5 years Alexander had acknowledged out loud what everyone knew. Emily wasn't just the employee. She was the heart that kept that house alive, the love that had filled the void left by Sarah, the mother the girls had chosen, even though the law didn't recognize that choice. "If I don't do this," said Emily with a calm she didn't feel, "there won't be a family left to keep together." They spent the night talking in whispers, like conspirators planning a revolution. Dr. Herrera had been clear. They had a 48-hour window to act. After that, the girls' organs would be too damaged for transplant. At dawn, when Atlanta woke with the usual noise of traffic and shops opening their metal shutters, Alexander took Emily's hand. "If we do this," he said, "we do it together. I assume all legal responsibility. You just save them." Emily felt something expand in her chest, something warm and powerful she hadn't felt since her sister Hope's death. "There's something else," she added, pulling a folded paper from her pocket. "I wrote this last night, in case something goes wrong." It was a letter addressed to Claire and Emma, written in the careful handwriting she used for messages in their school lunchboxes. The first lines read, "My beautiful girls, if you're reading this, it's because Mommy M had to make a very difficult decision." But what Emily didn't know was that someone else had been watching her secret movements, and that the perfect plan was about to become a race against time. Iberia Flight 6841 to Buenos Aires took off from Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport at 11:45 p.m. on April 20th. Among the first-class passengers traveled 3 people who defied all known laws of love and desperation. Emily had lied for the first time in her adult life. She told the nurses that Alexander had decided to transfer the girls to a private clinic in Argentina for experimental treatment. She falsified medical permits using Alexander's company letterhead. She bribed an immigration officer with $10,000 so he wouldn't ask too many questions about 2 minors traveling with a woman who didn't appear as legal guardian. Claire and Emma slept sedated in specially conditioned seats, connected to portable monitors that beeped softly in the silent cabin. To any casual observer, they looked like 2 sick children accompanied by their parents on a routine medical trip. But Emily knew she had crossed an invisible line. Technically, she had kidnapped her employer's daughters. Technically, she was taking them to a foreign country to subject them to surgery that could kill them. Technically, she had committed 6 crimes that could send her to prison for decades. The most tense moments came during the technical stop in São Paulo. A Brazilian federal police officer approached the seat where Emily watched over the girls' sleep, reviewing passports with that thoroughness characteristic of international airports. "Are you the mother?" he asked in Portuguese, noticing the surnames didn't match. Emily's heart stopped completely. If that officer decided to investigate more deeply, everything would crumble. The girls would be returned to Atlanta, Argentine doctors would cancel the surgery, and Claire and Emma would have exactly the same survival chances they'd had from the beginning. None. "I'm their heart's mother," she replied in Spanish, with a calm she didn't feel. "These girls are dying, and I'm their only hope." Something in her voice, or perhaps in the way she caressed Claire's golden curls while speaking, convinced the officer. He reviewed the medical documents Alexander had prepared, saw photographs of the girls in critical condition, and finally stamped the authorization. "Que Deus as proteja," he murmured, returning the passports. Alexander, sitting next to her, hadn't spoken a word since takeoff. He held Emma's hand with a tenderness that broke hearts, as if it were the last time he could touch his daughter. "Do you regret it?" whispered Emily as the plane flew over the Atlantic. "I'm terrified," he replied without taking his eyes off the girls. "But not regretful. If this goes wrong, at least we'll have tried everything." During the last 4 hours of the flight, Emily wrote letters. One for Claire, one for Emma, one for Alexander, and one for her mother in the Philippines, whom she hadn't seen in 5 years. She wrote farewells she hoped not to have to deliver, but needed to write just in case. "Mama, if something happens to me, know that I found my life's purpose. I cared for 2 girls like you cared for me. I loved them like you loved Hope. And if I have to leave so they can live, it's an exchange I'd make 1,000 times over." Hospital Italiano de Buenos Aires awaited them with a medical team that had been preparing for a week. Dr. Rodrigo Mendizabal, cardiovascular surgeon with 30 years of experience in complex transplants, had reviewed the medical records and designed an unprecedented surgical protocol. Extract 65% of Emily's liver and surgically divide it into 2 fragments perfectly compatible with Claire and Emma. "The operation will last between 14 and 18 hours, explained Dr. Mendizabal during the preoperative consultation. "We'll begin by extracting the liver fragment from the donor. Immediately after, we'll proceed with simultaneous transplants in adjacent operating rooms. It's the only way to keep tissue viable for both recipients." The technical complexity was overwhelming. They would have to surgically divide the liver fragment extracted from Emily into 2 portions exactly proportional to Claire and Emma's bodies. Each fragment had to maintain intact major vascular connections. A millimeter error could mean the failure of both transplants. "What are the real odds?" asked Alexander, needing to hear concrete numbers. Dr. Mendizabal didn't sugarcoat reality. "For individual living donor transplants, we have 95% success. For simultaneous multiple transplants, we're in uncharted territory. I'd say 70% chance that at least one of the girls survives, 40% that both make it. And for the donor," he didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Emily had approximately 85% chance of surviving surgery, but post-operative complications were unpredictable. Emily signed the consents with a firm hand, though she knew she was potentially signing her death sentence. But that night, when she went to say goodnight to Claire and Emma, she knew she had made the only possible decision. "Mommy Em," whispered Claire, "will we be better tomorrow?" "Tomorrow everything will change," Emily replied, kissing her forehead. "But we'll be together, whatever happens." Emma, more perceptive than her 6 years suggested, grabbed Emily's hand with her cold little fingers. "Are you getting surgery too?" "Yes, my love." "To be the same as us?" Emily felt her heart tear apart. "To be family for real, forever." "If something happens to me," she told Alexander the night before surgery, "I want you to know that these 5 years raising Claire and Emma have been the happiest of my life." "Nothing will happen," he replied, but his voice trembled like autumn leaves. The operation began at 6:30 a.m. on April 23rd. Emily entered the operating room walking, smiling at the nurses, trying to maintain the calm she had cultivated during 5 years of surrogate motherhood. Before anesthesia plunged her into unconsciousness, she thought of her sister Hope, of Claire and Emma's small hands clinging to hers, of all the lullabies she had sung and might never sing again. Dr. Mendizabal directed a team of 12 specialists. Emily's liver fragment extraction required 5 hours of microscopic surgery, disconnecting and reconnecting blood vessels the thickness of human hair. Every movement had to be perfect, every cut millimetric, every suture invisible. Claire and Emma were simultaneously prepared in adjacent operating rooms. Their little bodies, yellowed by liver disease, looked like porcelain dolls connected to machines that breathed for them. The most critical moment came when surgeons had to divide the liver fragment extracted from Emily. Using microscopes and precision surgical instruments, they separated the tissue into 2 exact portions, preserving vascular connections that would keep the transplanted organs alive. Alexander waited in a family room that smelled of reheated coffee and disinfectant. Each passing hour felt like eternity. At 9 a.m., a nurse informed him that Emily's liver tissue extraction had been successful. At noon, that the first transplant, Claire, had begun. At 3 p.m., that Emma had entered the second operating room. During these hours, Alexander relived every moment of the past 5 years. He remembered the first night Emily stayed when the girls had high fever, how she had slept in a chair between 2 cribs. He remembered the day Claire said her first word, "Mommy," directed not at Sarah's photograph on the mantel, but at Emily. He remembered the 1,000 small crises Emily had resolved with infinite patience. Nightmares, scraped knees, sister disputes, first school days. He realized with clarity that hurt physically that he had been an idiot for 5 years. He had had before his eyes the most extraordinary woman in the world and had been too cowardly, too blinded by the pain of losing Sarah to recognize it. At 11 p.m., Dr. Mendizabal emerged from the operating rooms with surgical scrubs soaked in sweat and an expression Alexander couldn't decipher. "How are they?" he asked, jumping up. The doctor sat slowly, as if carrying the world's weight on his shoulders. "The girls are stable. The transplants were successful. Their new livers are functioning perfectly." Alexander felt his legs buckle. "And Emily?" There was a silence that lasted 1,000 years. "She's alive," Dr. Mendizabal finally said. "But there were complications. Massive internal bleeding during closure. We had to transfuse 8 units of blood. She lost 40% of her blood volume. She's in intensive care, critical but stable." Alexander collapsed in the blue plastic chair he already knew by heart. For the second time in his life, he cried like a lost child. During the next 72 hours, Alexander lived in limbo between hope and absolute terror. He moved like a ghost between the intensive care unit where Emily fought for her life and the pediatric room where Claire and Emma slowly awakened from anesthesia. The second night, when doctors believed Emily couldn't hear them, Alexander sat beside her bed and spoke to her as he had never spoken to anyone before. "I don't know if you can hear me," he whispered, taking her cold hand in his. "But I need you to know something. For 5 years, I was a coward. I let you carry alone the weight of being a mother, of being this family's heart, while I hid behind work and pain over Sarah. You saved my daughters long before this operation. You saved them every day, with every lullaby, with every nightmare you chased away, with every smile you gave them back when I didn't know how." His voice broke like glass on the floor. "If I lose you now, I don't know how I'll explain to Claire and Emma that the person who loved them most in the world left because I wasn't capable of protecting you. I don't know how I'll live knowing I lost the best woman I've ever known because I was too blind to see what I had in front of me." In the adjacent room, Claire had awakened, asking for Emily every 5 minutes. Emma, though weaker, refused to eat if it wasn't Emily bringing the spoon to her mouth. The Argentine nurses, accustomed to family dramas of all kinds, were deeply moved seeing the connection between those girls and the woman who had risked her life for them. "It's like 3 hearts beating in the same rhythm," commented the head nurse, Maria Elena, while checking monitors. "When her pressure goes up, theirs does too. It's something I've never seen." The morning of the 3rd day, something changed in Emily's face. Her eyelids trembled slightly like butterflies awakening after winter. Alexander, who hadn't moved from that chair in more than 40 hours, immediately sat up. "Emily? Can you hear me?" She opened her eyes slowly, blinking against the white hospital lights. Her first word was a barely audible whisper. "Girls?" "They're perfect," Alexander replied, and the tears he had been holding for 3 days fell freely down his cheeks. "They're perfect. And you're going to be perfect too." Dr. Mendizábal came running when nurses told him Emily had awakened. Her vital signs had miraculously stabilized overnight. Internal bleeding had ceased, her kidneys were functioning normally, and her liver showed early signs of regeneration. "It's extraordinary," murmured the doctor, reviewing charts. "We've seen cases of rapid recovery, but this seems fueled by something beyond medicine." When they could finally bring Emily in a wheelchair to the girls' room, the scene that followed was etched in everyone's memory present. Claire and Emma, who had been listless and worried for days, lit up like Christmas trees seeing their Mommy M appear. "We knew you'd be okay," shouted Claire, trying to sit up in bed. "We told Daddy you always keep your promises." Emma, weaker but equally excited, extended her little arms toward Emily. "Mommy M, does your tummy not hurt anymore? Can we go home now?" Emily hugged them carefully, feeling her heart expand to fill the entire room. For the first time in a week, all three were together, alive, breathing the same air, sharing the same miracle. "Yes, my loves," she whispered against the golden curls she knew better than her own reflection. "We can go home now." Dr. Mendizábal documented the case as simultaneous liver transplant with accelerated recovery due to psycho-emotional factors. But the nurses at Hospital Italiano had a simpler explanation. They had witnessed the power of maternal love in its purest form. News of the Buenos Aires miracle leaked to Argentine press 3 days later. Journalists from across the continent began arriving at the hospital, asking for interviews, photographs, exclusive statements. Emily rejected all requests with the same phrase. "My reward is seeing them live. I don't need anything more." But Alexander made a decision that would change everything. He called a press conference in the hospital lobby and for the first time in 5 years spoke publicly about his family. "This woman," he said, pointing toward the room where Emily rested with the girls, "is not technically my daughter's biological mother. But she's the person who has loved, protected, and raised them since they were born. Today she risked her life to save theirs, and she did it knowing she legally had no right to make that decision. If that's not true motherhood, then I don't know what is." His words, broadcast live by 3 Argentine channels and retransmitted internationally, unleashed a debate that would reach the U.S. Congress and change adoption laws in both countries. Under Claire's pillow, nurses found the letter Emily had written before surgery. The first lines, written in that careful handwriting of school lunchbox messages, read, "My beautiful girls, if you're reading this, it's because Mommy M had to make a very difficult decision. You once asked me why I loved you so much, and I told you love needs no explanation. Today I show you that love also needs no legal papers. If I don't wake up from this operation, know that Mommy said yes to everything. Yes to caring for you, yes to protecting you, yes to loving you more than my own life. You weren't born from my womb, but you were born from my heart. And that, my loves, is all that truly matters." But the story didn't end there. What had begun as a desperate act of love was about to become something that would change 2 countries' laws. On April 2nd, 2027, Claire and Emma Mitchell Thompson turned 8 in the family home's garden in Atlanta, under a spring sky that seemed painted especially for the occasion. Their crystal laughter filled the air as they ran between purple balloons and a table decorated with a meringue castle Emily had baked that same morning. But this wasn't just any party. It was a celebration that had brought together people from 3 continents, all connected by a story that had transcended newspaper pages to become a symbol of hope. Dr. Mendizábal had flown from Buenos Aires, especially for this birthday. During these 2 years, He had maintained constant correspondence with the family, documenting the extraordinary recovery of both Emily and the girls for the international medical community. "In 30 years of medicine," he confessed while watching Claire and Emma play with complete normalcy, "I've never seen such perfect liver regeneration. The transplanted fragments grew at the exact pace their bodies needed. It's as if love had programmed biology." Also present was Maria Elena, head nurse from Hospital Italiano, who had become a kind of Argentine godmother to the girls. She had come accompanied by her own family, because Emily's story had inspired her teenage daughter to study medicine. "Your mommy Em taught me that being a nurse isn't just administering medications," she had told Claire the day before. "It's administering hope." From the Philippines had come representatives of the Hope Thompson Foundation, which in these 2 years had funded medical treatments for more than 200 vulnerable children. Among them was Daniela, a 9-year-old girl who had received a liver transplant thanks to the fund created by Emily, and who now ran through the garden as the twins' best friend. "Did you know Mommy Em is famous in my country?" Daniela had told Claire and Emma. "In my school there's a mural with her face, and it says, 'Love has no borders.'" But perhaps the most emotional presence was that of Carmen Mitchell, Alexander's mother, who had arrived from Savannah with a suitcase full of family memories. For 5 years she had maintained a distant relationship with her unofficial daughter-in-law, not completely understanding Emily's role in the family. "I was a fool," she had told Emily the night before, while they prepared food for the party together. "I was so worried about appearances, about what neighbors would say about my son living with the help, that I didn't see the obvious. You were exactly what this family needed." Carmen had brought her grandmother's wedding ring, a white gold band with a small diamond that had passed from mother to daughter-in-law for 4 generations. "This ring belongs to Claire and Emma's real mother," she had said, placing it on Emily's finger. "And that's you." The impromptu ceremony that followed had no legal validity, but it had something more powerful: complete family recognition. Alexander, who had been planning this moment for 2 years, knelt in front of Emily in the same garden where the girls played. "Emily Thompson," he said with a trembling voice, "I'm not asking you to marry me for legal convenience or because we need papers certifying what we already are. I'm asking because I want the whole world to know you're the bravest, most generous, and most loving woman I've ever met. I'm asking because I want to grow old beside you, watching our daughters grow, building the family we already are." Emily looked at him with those eyes that had seen pain and chosen hope, that had faced death and returned stronger. "Alexander Mitchell," she replied. "I already said yes 5 years ago. The first time Claire called me Mommy. I said yes every night I stayed awake when they had fever. I said yes in that Buenos Aires operating room. Today I only confirm what my heart already knew. Yes, forever." The kiss that followed was applauded by 50 guests from different countries, but especially by 2 8-year-old girls who finally saw their lifelong family officially recognized. During the party, a call came that everyone had been waiting for: the U.S. Congress had definitively approved Emily's law, which allowed adoptions through demonstrated emotional bonds in exceptional cases. Argentina had established a similar protocol, and 12 other Latin American countries were studying equivalent legislation. "Your story changed the world," the CNN reporter who had covered the case from the beginning told Emily. "How does it feel knowing thousands of non-traditional families will have legal rights thanks to what you lived through?" Emily, carrying Emma, who had fallen asleep after so much playing, smiled with that tranquility she had developed during years of silent motherhood. "It feels good knowing other heart mothers won't have to choose between law and love," she replied. "But mostly it feels good that Claire and Emma grow up in a world where true love always finds a way to be recognized." That night, after all guests had left and the house recovered its family silence, Emily found Alexander in the study reading newspaper clippings he had collected during these 2 years. "You know what's most extraordinary about all this?" she told him, pointing to headlines talking about medical miracles, legislative changes, and family revolutions. "What?" That for me, nothing has really changed. I'm still the same woman who wakes up every morning thinking about what breakfast the girls will want. I still sing the same lullabies. I'm still Mommy M. Alexander closed the scrapbook and hugged her with the infinite gratitude of someone who has learned to recognize everyday miracles. And that's why, he whispered against her hair that smelled of chamomile shampoo, that's exactly why you're the mother they needed. From their bedrooms, Claire and Emma slept deeply, with that absolute tranquility of children who know, without any doubt, that they are completely loved and protected. On the shared nightstand, next to their favorite stuffed animals, was the photograph that had become the family's most treasured possession. The three of them at Buenos Aires Hospital, the day they were together again after the operation. Emily in a wheelchair, Claire and Emma on each side, all smiling with that happiness only known by those who have returned from very far away. Some mothers are born in childbirth, others are born in a promise fulfilled. This story has reached its end, but true love stories never really finish. They keep living in every act of kindness, in every silent sacrifice, in every promise kept against all odds. Have you lived an experience where someone demonstrated unconditional love that changed your life forever? Do you know a person who, like Emily, chose love above laws, conventions, or fears? Leave us in the comments what country you're watching from and tell us. Who has been your Emily in life? That person who was there when you needed them most, who cared for you without expecting anything in return, who showed you that true love isn't defined by legal papers, but by concrete actions. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel. Here you'll find more stories that heal, inspire, and make you believe again in the infinite goodness of the human heart. Because in a world that sometimes seems full of pain, stories like Emily's remind us of a fundamental truth. Love always finds a way. Always. See you in the next story.